But I do want to point out, these sketches that Paul is extremely fortunate to be a part of in the one that he has, I think most court reporters would love to be a part of. I only know one other court reporter who has a handwritten sketch from a trial where they appeared in the sketch. And in my days, there was a sketch artist in a courtroom that I was in one time, and I was included in one of the sketches, and I tried very, very hard to get a copy of it and was never successful in doing it. And I've always kind of been envious of those that have been able to be included in a sketch like that. So that's a beautiful sketch, and it looks like Paul, and so that's really kind of a real prize to have something like that.
So we probably should give it back to Paul when the day is over today?
No doubt.
Not go for auction?
I got another one.
Hey, Jerry, while you're talking, you clearly know a lot about a lot of these people that preceded you. If you had to explain Tom Muldowney, how would you do that?
Well, Tom Muldowney is considered among the court reporters, and not just here in Chautauqua County, but Tom is very well known actually among the 8th District, which includes the 8 counties of far western New York. And you can ask court reporters in Buffalo, you can ask court reporters here in Chautauqua County. Tom Muldowney is our guru. He is one of the hardest working reporters that I've ever known. He loves court reporting. Nobody can make money like Tom Muldowney. And we reporters know it, and we respect him for it. And it wasn't just court reporting that Tom was able to make a buck in. He sold RVs, he's got condos up and down the coast. That's who Tom Muldowney is. He is the precursor of all court reporters that have followed him. And court reporters really do look at Tom with a little bit of reverence for what he's been able to do for himself and for the court reporting profession. There's no doubt about it.
He's sitting near my wallet. I just want to make sure. I'm way ahead of you.
That's a good idea.
Can I jump in here?
These guys brought notes.
Yeah, go ahead, Tom. Now that you've been appropriately introduced, go ahead.
It just leads me into my first story here. Working in Buffalo as a hearing reporter back in the 60s, making $5,200 a year, which was all right, but always looking for something better, and I was always taking the exams and so forth, whatever came along. And I took a particular exam for Chautauqua County. This is telling you how I got here. Anyway, Pat calls me up one day and she says, you know that exam that you took, you came out pretty good on it. And I said, yeah, I know. I said, but I'm not going down to Chautauqua County making the same amount of money I'm making now. She said, no. She says, it's $8,400. I said, what? $3,000 increase in the 60s. So I said, we got to move. We just bought a duplex there in Kenmore. I said, we got to go. We got 2 kids and one on the way. Actually, turned out to be twins. The 2 twins are sitting here now. So anyway, I got the interview with Judge Palmer, who, as you mentioned, was the first family court judge in Chautauqua County. He set up the interview for, I think, a Sunday afternoon. He was doing 2 at a time. And so I came down with a friend of mine. He was also interested in the job. And I won't make this a long, drawn-out story, I promise. Anyway, I got as far as Lackawanna, and my car broke down. Oh, here I'm going for a job interview. I'm going to be late or not make it at all. And a trucker came along and gave me a ride. He was hauling cars, car carrier. And he got to Dunkirk, and I said, you can just let me off here. I'll hitchhike from here. He says, no, I'm taking you right to the judge's office. So he took me right down to 4th Street, dropped me off, made the interview, and talked to the judge. Judge said to both of us, he said, I want to show you around Dunkirk and Fredonia. This is the end of it. We took us out to Shorewood, showed us the country club. Frank and I looked at each other. Is he kidding? You're gonna belong to a country club? No way. So anyway, that's the end of that story. That's, didn't have two nickels to rub together when I came to Chautauqua County.
Well, Tom, since you're continuing to talk, why don't you introduce Paul Keating? What did you know about him?
I didn't know anything about him until I got here. And then I sat in with him with some criminal trials, and he had some lawyers with false teeth that I couldn't hear or understand. All those who I'm talking about, the teeth were clicking. I said, "How do you get that?" He said, "Oh, I'm used to it." And I was godfather for his son.
You were? Striking.
But we worked together for a long time, and if I got in a big civil case or a malpractice case with a lot of medical in it and couldn't spell something, I would walk over from the Gerace building over to his office. "Hey, Paul, how do you spell this?" And he had all the mice running around his office because he was into this herbs and spices and all that stuff before anybody else was.
Be careful.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
So I've known him a long time.
Unfortunately.
Paul, what drew you to becoming a court reporter?
We knew them. My uncle had a tavern over in Lexington, in Ashland, the upscale place, The Place. And one of them used to come in there, and because he was my uncle, I got special treatment. And that kind of looked pretty good to me then. I knew them generally that way. From this one fellow, Harry Burke was a well-known reporter at the time, and that aroused my curiosity. And in high school, I loved shorthand. And I happened to see in New York one day at a convention the world champion, Martin Duperl from White Plains, and when he was 18 years old, he wrote 280 words a minute, but he was a freak. I wasn't, I hope. So, and I never, even though I took the stenotype, I felt that it was too commercial. And these fellows that were in New York, some of them, by that time the stenotype had come into vogue because there was too much money in big trials with that kind of thing. But I stayed with some of these guys and stayed with shorthand. And although I can write the machine, I'm not comfortable with it though. So.
Well, great segue, super segue. Your buddy Jerry provided to me to give to you now a book, Court Reporter's Notebook, June 11th, 1962. Do the math.
I was 9 months old. While I was 9 months old, I was suckling at the breast and crying my pants whenever I felt like it. And you were sitting in court writing that down. And had been for how many years by that time?
Yeah, so on the cover it says June 11th, 1962, and then Dunkirk, June 13th, Fancher, Children's Court, Palmer, June 15th, Jamestown, Phillips, Children's Court, June 18th, Mayville. And if it's found, please return to Paul Keating at the 506 Wellman Building, Jamestown, New York. I must tell you, Jerry found it about 20 years ago and was just trying to find the office building at 506 Wellman. But he asked me if you would be so kind as to see if you could actually read this to us, because I can't.
Oh boy.
Just pick a page and see if you can read something from that, Paul.
That's family court.
While he's looking through that book, I want you to know that in the state of New York, we have 2 retention periods. One for civil and family court matters. And the retention period for court reporters' notes is 5 years. The retention period for all criminal court notes in New York State is 50 years. Now, I'm in charge of all the notes in Chautauqua County now, Tom's, Paul's, and all the other court reporters in Chautauqua County that have been through our courthouse. And I have been destroying Paul's notes now at the rate of about 2 boxes a year for about the last 4 years. And every year, 2 more of Paul's boxes of notes come up as eligible for destruction, 50 years old and older. And I think that's pretty amazing. You know, that's pretty tough. And if it ever needed to be done, and that's why we're letting Paul go through this little exercise, we as court reporters need to be able to take those notes that happened however long ago and still create a transcript with them if we can. And of course, that's the purpose for the retention periods. So we just wanted to see whether I should just go ahead and destroy the rest of the notes.
All right, Paul, did you get anything that you can decide?
Yeah, this is, I'm leery about this because of one reason. To show cause out in the matter of adoption of Michael Mitchell Muldowney, Jr., a minor over the age of 18 years, by Jack Fair and Eleanor Mabel Fair, husband and wife, appearances, Ori Ottaway for the petitioner. Hey, Tony, where's Span? Was there an Ori Ottaway around?
He's here.
Yeah.
Huh? Was there? Ori Ottaway?
Yeah, Cory, he'd be out of his son.
Oh, see, I didn't know it was, oh, yeah. Eleanor, did you hear it?
No, what?
Eleanor Mabel Fair appears in person in court. The affidavit of service by so-and-so of Kelsey shows on Michael Mitchell Melnick, June 5th, 1962, Erie, Pennsylvania. We have noticed a Samuel Price appears for Michael Mitchell Melnick. He requests an adjournment continuously for an adjournment for 11 o'clock in Dunkirk on June 13th.
That's a request for an adjournment. Very nicely done.
That's, you know, wait till the Hungarian psychiatrists come around. I'm going to get sick to my stomach.
Can I inject a humorous story?
Yeah, like there hasn't been any?
This involves Judge O'Connor and myself. One day we got to talking about boats and so forth, and he said he had a boat, little Arkansas Traveler, at Barkowiak's Marina. Ray Barkowiak, some of you knew him, some of you don't. But anyway, he was an attorney, Ray was. And I don't know how I dwindled my way into using Judge O'Connor's boat. He said, Tom, you can use it, kid, you can use it anytime you want. He says, it was only once a year. He says, I take it out and I go with D. Warner White and we go up to Barcelona. And he said, just make sure the boat is there when I'm going. I said, oh, no problem, Judge, just let me know when you go. So I used the boat. It was a little 14-footer and it was really nice that he let me use it. And the time came and he says, hey, Muldowney, next Saturday, D. Warner and I are going out on the boat. He said, can you get somebody to get the boat out in the dock at the end there so we don't have to maneuver it and so forth? I said, sure, I'll get Johnny, Ray's Barkowiak's son. He said, okay, that'd be great. And I said, well, let me tell you something, Judge, about it. Oh, you don't have to tell me about boats. I know about boats for years, he said. You know. I said, well, the battery is not really good and sometimes you can't, the battery goes dead when you're trying to start it. So then you got to go back and pull the cord on the outboard motor. But make sure you put the throttle back in the neutral position. Oh, don't tell me, I know all about it and so forth and so on. I said, okay. So I take it from here with, well, no, I was there when he came down and got it, and he's yelling for Johnny to get the boat out there, and Johnny's telling him, Judge, the boat is out there, it's all ready for you to go. He goes out to the dock, and away he goes. So I left, and then they come back, and they've had a few up in Barcelona there, and he's trying to line up. Ray Barkowiak's telling me the story here. He's not helping him, he's just watching him. He's enjoying this, you know. And Judge is trying to line it up to the dock, and he stalls it. So he goes back to pull the cord, and he hasn't pulled the throttle, put the throttle into neutral. And today, you couldn't do this. He pulls the cord, and the boat starts. almost at full power. Goes under the dock, cleans the windshield off, the horn and everything else, almost decapitated them. And he can't get to the front. And Ray Barkowiak is wetting his pants. He's wet. And a boat is zooming all around the docks and so forth. Finally, they got it stopped. You know, and Ray told that story at every bar association picnic for years on it. So that was funny.
There's no segue to this, but Jerry, I'm looking at your bio here, and Judge Cass indicated you were trained by the mob. What was that about?
Well, I went to Alfred State College for my education as a court reporter. It's a 2-year school, and it's over in Allegheny County. And at the end of my 3 years in the 2-year school, a lady who had a freelance agency in Scranton, Pennsylvania, came up every year to Alfred to interview court reporters to try to take down to their freelance firm and put them to work. And when she came to interview, I thought, well, I knew when she came to interview that she was a very formidable woman. She was a fiery Italian. She was tall. She was unintimidable, and she was kind of brutalizing some of the students there. And I thought, boy, you know, this is the only chance I have to try to go somewhere. What am I going to do if they offer me a job? Well, they did offer me a job. So, of course, I thought, well, there you go. I'm going to go to Scranton, Pennsylvania. Now, I was born in Scioto, raised in Scioto. You know, our jobs during the summer was picking rocks out of the field and throwing it in the back of the, you know, farmer's tractor. But off I went to Scranton. The name of the company was G&G Reporting. And it was this lady and her husband, Fred. And they were two very forceful Italian people. And they had an office in Old Forge, Pennsylvania. Well, I came to find out later that Old Forge at the time, and I don't know whether it still is, was a hotbed for mob activity in the Scranton area and in the that area of Pennsylvania. And of course their office was in Old Forge, so I had to go into Old Forge quite a bit. I remember when my mom and dad took me down to Scranton so that we could get an apartment. They invited us over for dinner. And while we were there, my mom was off with Kathy, and Fred decided that he wanted to show my father and I his arsenal because he knew that we were hunters and he wanted us to see his guns. Well, it was unbelievable guns that this man had in his house, and I remember when we left, my father and I were kind of like, holy cow, what is going on with that? And I'm sure that as my mom and dad were driving home, they were thinking, turn around, Frank, we got to go back and get him. But it really became clear to me, because I had to go down to this office in Old Forge, and in the office they had all the scopists, and that was back before the computers, and we were writing, and then we would dictate, and scopists would help us out by typing things, and they had a scopist in the office who was a very young, very attractive Italian girl, and she was probably at the time 3 or 4 years older than I was, and she would transcribe for me, and I would have to sit with her and do stuff once in a while, and she would always talk about how her boyfriend was an up-and-coming member of the mob and how she couldn't wait to become a mob wife. And I remember sitting there thinking to myself, what the hell? And it was really a very, very unique year. They had a lot of, I felt like I was immersed in it and surrounded by it. And they were very good to me. They were very good to me. But I really was quite careful. I kind of watched my P's and Q's as to what I was doing. I remember one time Fred took me to a town meeting, and it was horrible. And I'm a fresh reporter. And we came out of the meeting, and I said to Fred, it was one of those they're just horrible. They're the worst things any court reporter can ever have to take. And I said, Fred, I don't know how you took anything that went on in there, and I don't know how you ever expect me to come to one of these things and take this stuff down. That was ridiculous. And he said, oh, Jerry, it's not going to be a problem. Don't worry about it. Just do what I do. And I kind of looked at him, and he said, I just write etc. And I thought, well, I don't think you're writing etc., buddy, but okay, whatever. But that was a real experience. I was there for 13 months, and then I left for Potter County shortly after that. But I look back on that as a really unique time in my life, for sure.
Well, speaking of unique times, Paul, you were involved in a variety of interesting cases, and one of them resulted in a letter which I'll read. April 23rd, 1996. Dear Paul, I owe so many letters to friends and family that it is disgusting. So I am resorting to this cowardly, duplicated letter just to catch up. Nothing is in writing from either John T. Ward, Neil Robinson, or then Judge Lee Town Adams, but the nature of the parole board's approach to me makes it transparent that the Mayville Mafia is behind their refusal to release me. They used my killing of the vicious dog about 1976 as a pretense of proof I am unfit for release. Goes on to say, I tend to believe that anyone who has done the dirt that the Mayville Mafia, my term for the Ward-Adams-Robinson combo, have done to me would expect that I would come out of prison with thoughts of retaliation by homicide. That is not at all the case, but they seem to be making their judgments on the basis of the way a normal man or a normal baboon, such as themselves, would react to 15 years of unjust imprisonment. It is, after all, a terrible crime against me, and they knowingly did it as a gross perversion of justice. Signed, Kelvin K. of Oaknoe.
You heard of him?
Kelvin of Oaknoe.
Tell me about Kelvin of Oaknoe.
Do I have to? I used to get that kind of letter probably every couple months because I was on his preferred list. There was another list and they were all on it. And I was going to keep myself isolated if I could, but I was trying to, the law requires you to send a transcript for the sentencing minutes, so I didn't want to get in the bag. It was the only reason that, well, when he first, I'm trying to figure out, I think I can start by, I have a real good friend who's a court reporter in Buffalo. And we were kids together, and the phone rang one night, and Calvin was in. He says, hey, your buddy's here. I said, what? He said, Calvin of Oaknoe. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, he was driving down Main Street the other day, and gets into a fender bender in Genesee Street, someplace like that. Maybe it might have been a taxi cab, too. But anyway, they get him into city court before a very fine gentleman, old Clifford Chifman, a 90-woman. He says, now, Mr. Oaknoe, I got to give you your rights here. He says, I know you do. He says, but I don't need them. And he said, well, just take it easy. No, you take it easy. I said, well, now, be careful. No, you be careful. And this is Calvin. So the first thing you know, there's a Bible there. Picks up the Bible, hits him on the head. Well, Calvin was 30 days late to come back to Mayville. That was the beginning of Calvin. So he was a volatile character. And I know when I asked about him. And I think one of the reasons I'm a little careful, if I'm quoting him from, I know somebody said it, but what court was it? Was it grand jury? Was it family court? And do I want to get in the bed with a guy like that? I was willing to take a chance and tell general stories about him too. But I don't think that there's not a court that I've been with him. He got down there with some dog down in Frewsburg, and he got a little trouble there. And the state trooper on the right-hand side lights up a cigarette. Well, if you lit a cigarette, he'd knock your head off. And that's his problem. On the opening of hunting season, the guy that ran the Friendly Grill over here, Doug Kelly. He was a hunter too, and he came along, and the two of them would meet on that side road over there, and wow, Calvin won. And that was the start of playing in the big leagues for him. And it was a tough thing. And from that time on, it was nothing but trouble. You name it, he was in it. And I know one time, I often said God gives all of us a little bit of talent, and even Calvin. That's not quite the way it was. But I went down to my daughter's house in the Catskills one day and knocked on the door, and my 9-year-old grandson came flying with a little sign, "Run, Bucky, run." So he wanted to know about Calvin, because Calvin had become a cult hero down there. And there were so many things about the guy that he had this theory. John Goodell somehow met him and gave the thing to Judge Adams about his tenants. And it turned out to be that Adams looks him over, and one of them is 10 months is the real year, not 12. And he had a few ideas like that. You don't have children in the regular way that way. You do it Calvin's way. And he and his wife marry, and incidentally, he wrote the marriage ceremony, and she signed it, so to make it legal. And what you do is they decided Aldous Huxley should be the father of his kids. So they write a letter to Aldous Huxley over in his mansion over in England someplace, and he writes a letter back, and he says, "Dear Calvin, I'm very flattered by your letter," and he says, "I've considered it, but," he says, "I'm 86 years of age, and I don't think I better continue with this." Another winner for him. I'd like to go on with the guy, but it's just I'll leave it like that for temporarily until I can construct it better.
Okay.
Question,
What's that? Yeah.
did you take the trial where Calvin decided that he was a church, so he didn't have to pay any taxes, and that was a trial before Judge Adams?
No, but I'm aware of that. I don't know who took that thing, but he also, didn't he declare clergyman discounts? Because he was the god of Oakdale. It was his own planet. And Judge Adams thought he had a better system than we did. How do I get another job, at this stage of the game? No, I know what you're talking about, though. That was I shouldn't say this because I can't prove it, but I understand he had the first computer job in Warren State Hospital in 1959. He was a genius, no question about that, but he couldn't tie his shoes. So he's standing opening the door, and this guy comes up, he's got a cigar, and Calvin says, "Put that cigar out." "Well, who the hell are you?" Well, by the time it was all over, they rolled down the stairs and out the front door, and Calvin never came back, and neither did the computer. That's the way it was. I don't know, it's just too wild to actually believe it, but those are the things you hear about the guy. So,
Tom, you're also involved in a pretty famous murder case in Attica. How did you connect with that?
Well, actually, I thought I missed it. I was very happy about it. We were up as a family it was at Easter time, up in Niagara Falls at a Holiday Inn with the kids. I said to Pat, well, it looks like I haven't been selected to work Attica. They didn't call me. And about an hour later, this court reporter, one of the older court reporters, called me, Eddie Hoy, and said, "Tom, would you work a daily copy with me?" I barely knew what a daily copy meant, you know. So I said, sure, what am I, you know, I was, you know, impressed that he would ask me to work with him. So I did, and I don't know if I should go on about daily copies.
For some of folks, not all lawyers here, there's so the public at large, what is a daily copy?
A daily copy is where, at the end of the day, the lawyers have a complete transcript of the proceedings. Today, that's not a big deal. Jerry probably writes with a computer, and you have a real time, what they call real time, and you have the transcript ready because the machine produces it, I guess. But in those days, we used 2 court reporters, a runner, and a typist. And how we would start in the morning, Eddie and I would both be down. By the way, he was a shorthand writer. We were both down sitting where the court reporter would sit, and Eddie would take the first couple of minutes. The judge would say, for instance, the jury was there, or he would say, okay, bring the jury in, and then the jury would come in. He would say, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, what we're going to do today, we're going to have such and such a witness. About that time, Eddie would stand up, and I would continue on, and he would talk about who the witness was. Eddie would go to a side room and would dictate, would say to the typist, this is tape 1 of such and such. And then the runner would take that tape up to the typist, and she would start the type, bring the jury in, ladies and gentlemen, this is, meanwhile, when Eddie got done dictating, he would come back out and relieve me. Now, I had a little more because I had to wait for him to dictate all that. And it went back and forth all morning, and some of the takes probably went 30, 40 minutes before you got relieved by your partner. And then we worked through the lunch hour, and by the end of the lunch hour, we had a full transcript of the day. And then we started all over at noontime. I mean, at 1:30 or 2 o'clock, whenever we started, the same process continued on. And then at the end of the day, we caught up, we proofread the transcript, and by 8 o'clock that night, we had a complete transcript for the attorneys. And we started over the next day, same process.
What'd you learn from the Attica murder trials? It certainly had a lot of attention subsequent to the actual trials. What was your takeaway from that, your experience there?
I guess there was a lot of innocent people prosecuted.
Right.
And I only did one of the trials. We had multiple defendants on it. They were all found not guilty in our particular case, but it was a tragic thing. I mean, I did it with Judge Kassler. But like I say, it was the first time I had ever done a daily copy, and it was a great experience. I did a few after that.
This is a kind of a jump ball. What's from the type of trials you've handled, whether it's murder trials, whether it's just other felony type trials, or even did you get involved with some civil trials? What's the toughest thing to sort of just technologically keep up with? Is it do you get a sense of all that? I'll ask you, Tom, first. It's just type of trial.
Medical malpractice probably was the toughest. Yeah.
Jerry?
No doubt about it. Medical malpractice is the toughest. Although, when I was in Scranton, there was a very particularized type of hearing that we did quite a bit of, and they were referred to as black lung hearings because of the coal mines in Pennsylvania. And they had black lung hearings the same way we have workers' comp hearings up here, and it would be one after another. And the terminology, you have to get to know the terminology in any kind of case that you're working on. Medical malpractice is the worst, but we have court reporters who specialize in medical malpractice, and they'll go in and take a med mal, and they'll have no trouble at all. The black lung hearings were very technical, and they were tough. They were tough on me, especially as a new reporter, but it just really doesn't matter. The worst kind of a case to take is a case where you got a fast talker, where you got somebody who just talks fast and they just won't slow down no matter what you do. And it can be the easiest material in the world, but if you can't slow a witness down, it makes for the most miserable day that a court reporter can encounter. No doubt about it.
Paul, did you ever take any affirmative action to get the attention of a lawyer who talked fast, or was maybe recalcitrant, or maybe a witness? Did you ever have to react?
Maybe outside an alley, but not in a courtroom. It's just, what you're doing is you're hurting him too. He's the guy tries to help him. Some can't. They're just that way. It's that's a good question too. I mean, what are you going to do with the guy? But, you have to stop him if you don't adhere it. And I can think.
In fairness to Paul, you would always give us a warning before you would stop us. Could you demonstrate the warning?
I'd rather not.
What it was all of a sudden he would lift his thumb and that page would real quick. And if you didn't pick up on that, the next thing you know is, wait a minute!
No court reporter can say that they haven't ever forcefully interrupted someone, and sometimes with a little bit of angst in their voice, because it becomes so frustrating. So,
Well, how do you do it, Jerry?
well, I'll tell you, I used to be very poor at it. I really was. I was very poor at it. I would kind of get a little upset, when you asked somebody to slow down, or you tried to point out to somebody how difficult the testimony is. But there really kind of came a point in my career where, as Paul said, I realized that I wasn't doing myself any favors because it didn't make me look good, and I wasn't doing anybody else any favors because they had to deal with a reporter who was upset. Over the last 10 or 15 years of my career, I've actually, I try to be very cordial. I really do. Sometimes I might get just a little more curt than other times, but I really do try to be very cordial now, and it's one of the things actually that I'm kind of proud of, because it's not easy. It's not easy. You just try to make yourself, excuse me, counsel, I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand what you said. My fault, not your fault. Excuse me, counsel, I'm sorry, I just got behind on that. Could you please repeat that question again? I have never worked for a judge who did not allow me to do what I had to do to make the record. Now, in my years in Buffalo, when I came to Buffalo, I had worked in the federal system for 8 years. I'd been in the state Pennsylvania system for 3.5 years. I did my stint in Scranton for a year. So I had a few years under my belt when I came to Buffalo. And my supervisor in Buffalo, because of that, knew that I knew what I was doing. He could put me wherever he needed me, and I could handle it. So he kind of used me a little bit of his troubleshooter. Well, one day I was in the office, and we had a reporter in Buffalo who was an excellent reporter. My understanding, the only reporter that ever scored perfectly on the New York State Court Reporting Test. His name was Martin Wright, an excellent reporter. Martin was covering Judge Sedita in Buffalo, Chicky Sedita, who some of you may know. And I was in my office, and Sedita had a hot argument going on over in his courtroom, and Martin was handling it. And Marty couldn't keep up. Marty was the kind of guy that would throw his hands up. That was the kind of throw his hands up. Every court reporter has their techniques. Marty's was to throw his hands up. Well, he was having trouble taking the testimony, and Judge Sedita looked down at Marty and he said, "You interrupt us again, and I'm going to kick you out of my courtroom." So they continued on with the argument, and Marty, who had a lot of time under his belt, and was, as I said, a very accomplished reporter, interrupted him again. So Judge Sedita said, "You get out," and called over to the office to my boss, Jim, and said, "Send me another reporter." So Jim saddles down to my office. You always knew when Jim was coming because he was a whistler. I'm a whistler. Anybody who knows me knows I'm a whistler. Jim was a whistler. He always knew when he was coming. And he came in and he said, "Jerry, can you do me a favor?" I said, "Sure, what's going on, Jim?" Judge Sedita kicked Marty out of his courtroom. I gotta have somebody go up there and finish this argument. Can you go up and take it for me? I said, sure, Jim, no problem, I'll go up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, phew, here we go. You know, I knew Judge Sedita. Judge Sedita was a vulnerable cat. So up to Sedita's courtroom I go, and I go in and I sit down, and I had worked with him once before, so I'm sitting, he's up here, I'm sitting down in my little spot, and they're going at it. And I know by this time that when things like that are happening in the courtroom, court reporters don't interrupt. You don't interrupt. You do the very best you can, you write as hard as you can, you get everything you can get, but you don't interrupt because they don't want to be interrupted, and they'll only get angry at you, as they did with Marty if they did. So I'm writing along, and they're arguing back and forth, and they're writing along, and Sedita's getting hotter and hotter, and I'm watching it, and I'm writing as fast as I can, and all of a sudden, out of the blue, Sedita looks up, and he looks down, and he goes, "You, get out of here!" I left my machine where it was, I got up, I walked out of the courtroom, and I thought to myself, what the hell am I? So you had to be careful. You have to be careful as a court reporter. You have to be respectful. It's not always easy to do, but I've gotten better at it over the years.
I lucked out with my toughest witness of all, and wouldn't you know it, she was probably the most famous, Dr. Judith Lahote, the medical examiner from Buffalo and Budapest, Hungary. And the state sometimes sends these guys over to go on for competency hearings. If you haven't heard them with Hungarian accents, you're in for it. Or once in a while, you do get good though. I mean, you get used to it, but it takes you a little while to do it. And this day was the hell of a trial, and she was a very important part of the trial, and she was answering in a flamboyant manner, "Each was authorizing." And I looked like this, and she said, "Eat was authorizing." Then I figured out what it meant. If one more, I think I would have got it. But that was the toughest I ever had that way. But,
What did it mean?
Yeah,
how do I know? It's like Dr. Suarez, the psychiatrist from Argentina. Something was six-pack. And I was thinking maybe I was writing six-pack. So I asked Bruce Carpenter, zigzag. No problem. You get it.
Tom, do you ever have a moment? A moment dealing with a witness, a judge, where you felt like you had to...
Oh, many times.
Anybody here want to talk about it?
What I could say is Judge Gerace made one of the best records
I agree.
of anybody.
I agree with that.
Absolutely.
And I think sometimes when the judge is at a certain pace, everything kind of slows down and makes it a lot easier. Trying to think.
Tom, you think, I got a Judge Gerace story. This was a great, Tom is right. Judge Gerace made, and he was a pleasure to be with, because one time, a young boy was out in Dunkirk, he was walking along the railroad tracks, got hit by a train. And he had been imbibing, he was under the influence a little bit, and his father decided that he was going to bring suit. He had hired a lawyer out of Buffalo, a lawyer who was a little older, was kind of at the end of his time, he was struggling a little bit, he didn't do a very good job on the case. The case was a real mess. We had an expert that had been retained in the case much previous to that by the plaintiffs to discuss the railroad and what was going on with the railroad and the new kind of tracks that they had in the Dunkirk area, which were known as ribbon rail. All of you remember the old kind of train tracks. I grew up next to a train track. You could hear them at night all day long. Click, 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 click. Well, the new ribbon rails in Dunkirk didn't have the connections made. They had the connections, but they had a weld, which made them a continuous ribbon rail, and it was a much silenter ride from the train. And that was kind of part of the theory of their case, was that this kid never heard the train coming because he didn't hear the distinctive clack, 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 clack. So they had hired this expert to come in and testify in this case. Well, in the meantime, this expert's son had called, apparently, the attorney and had said, look, my father was retained on this case a long time ago. In the interim, he's developed dementia. I don't think it's a good idea that he testify in this case. Well, the attorney decided to call him anyway. So now they're calling this gentleman to the stand. A fine-looking gentleman, I'm sure a very nice man in his day, and probably very, very intelligent. He gets on the stand and he's testifying in this case, and they're trying to get him to describe what these ribbon rails sound like, and the attorney is asking him, what does the train sound like? What does the train sound like? And this gentleman was given nonsense answers to everything. Finally, he got out of him what the train sounded like, and the gentleman saddled up to the mic and he said, the train goes choo-choo. I'm writing this down. And now I've told many people over my career that, especially at this point, it's really about the entertainment for me, not really what's going on in the courtroom. So at one point, this gentleman is given an answer, and it is gibberish, nonsense. And I'm taking the answer down, and I'm writing exactly what he says, because he was kind of a slow speaker, and I'm thinking to myself, this is great. I'm taking it all, and I'm writing along. And at the end of the answer, Judge Gerace leans forward on his bench, and he says, Jerry, could you read that answer back to me? And I went like this. I went... And so I leaned forward and I picked up my tape and I went back to the beginning and I started reading this answer back, word for word, just what the guy had said. Got all done with the answer, was putting the paper back in my tray, and there was kind of a pause, and Judge Gerace said, yeah, that's what I thought he said. Even when it was gibberish, Judge Gerace made a good record. That was a great trial. And there was no verdict in that case for the plaintiff. They found for the railroad in that case.
Talk about your judges. You talked a little bit about Judge Gerace there. Tom, talk about the judges you sat for.
I'm glad you asked, because I would be remiss if I didn't mention Judge Ricotta.
Yeah.
Judge Ricotta and I saw more of each other over the years than we saw our wives. We covered the whole 8th Judicial District, and we would maybe start out in Niagara County, and then we'd go to Allegheny County, and then we'd go to Cattaraugus County. But he was just a great guy and a down-to-earth guy. He was Joe Ricotta. I remember checking in the hotel in Olean and asking the front desk there, which room is the judge in? Because I didn't want to be close to him. He'd be checking up on me when I came in. They said, Judge who? I said, Judge Ricotta. They said, he's a judge? I said, he sure is a Supreme Court judge. They said, he never says anything to us about being a judge. He just says, Joe Ricotta, and that's the type of guy he was. And he was so easygoing. I mean, I used to do some crazy things, and he would always go along with it. One day, we were going at that time we were driving from Dunkirk to Buffalo all the time. I said, Joe, it's a nice day. Let's take my boat in. Not Judge O'Connor's, by that time I had my own. and it wasn't anything spectacular. It was a 20-foot open bow boat, IO, in Port Alport. He said, yeah? I said, sure, we'll go in, we'll use the ship-to-shore radio, and we'll call and have them come down and pick us up. And I was thinking about this the other day. I said, where did I dock the boat, when I got to Buffalo? But I must have maybe made some kind of arrangement. Anyway, we got into Buffalo. Jerry remembers this. He reminded me of this. And
I thought it was a great story.
And it took us about 45 minutes to get in. It was a beautiful day. The lake was nice. We called. They came down and got us. We went up, went to work, and I'd be riding in the elevator or something, and one of the elevator operators would say, hey, Tom, boy, it sounds like a beautiful yacht you have. I said, I don't have a yacht. Well, the judge told me it was a 42-foot cruising yacht. I said, no way. But anyway, then I took bunch of the court reporters out at lunchtime. We went over to the, what was that place? The Hatch, I guess it was. Yeah, got lunch, went out on the boat and so forth. Came back, went to work. And then we started for home, the judge and I, and the lake had turned like Lake Erie can turn. And it was like the ocean. Took us about 3 hours to get back to Dunkirk. He went to the chiropractor the next day. His back was killing him, you know, but those were some of the things we did.
How about the Jankowski ricotta story?
Oh, yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah. If you'll bear with me for that story, I will. But the Jankowski story, yeah, the Bar Association was having a meeting at the fireside, I guess it was. And
A lot of folks here don't know that Judge Jankowski
was blind.
Right.
Right. And just trying to put it together. Yeah, everybody was at the meeting and they were starting to leave. And Judge Ricotta was looking for his coat out in the coat room there. And Judge Jankowski said, "Joe, it's right next to the door there." Judge Ricotta said, "You're right," you know. But yeah, and then there was the other story that Tony wants me to tell. It was funny. I happened to be up in Mayville when there was a very serious accident. I was actually working with Judge Kastler at the time. And this lady had her little boy in the car. She worked for probation, and she was taking him to kindergarten or nursery school. And there was a young fella coming from Clymer, and it was a very snowy day. And she went over the line, and she hit the fella from Clymer head on, and she was killed. The child wasn't injured. So now fast forward about 6 or 9 months. Tony Spann has the plaintiff's case, which was her, or the estate, was it, Tony, that was handling it? John Plum was on the other side, am I right? Yeah. And we went into the trial, and they were taking testimony and so forth, and the trial got done, and the jury came back out, and they voted no cause for action. The judge leans over to, he was sure that they were going to get a verdict. So was Tony. Your wife wasn't though. She was with me. She really thought so. And the judge says, "What? No money?" What'd you say, Tony?
You need no really.
Yeah, that's right. What? No money? Oh.
How about the television set?
Oh yeah, that's another one. Tony, every once in a while, would get so excited on his cross-examination. You know, we had a case, and it was out. I don't mean to be taking up all this time, but anyway, it had something to do with the speed of the vehicle by the fairgrounds. And Tony was cross-examining him, and he was asking this fellow how fast they were going, and it was to the fellow's benefit to say they were doing a speed limit, 35 or something like that. And Tony said, "You sure you were doing 35? "Yes, I was doing 35. Goes, "How do you know? Were you watching the television?" And the witness says, "No, I was watching the speedometer."
Hey, Paul, give me your best Lee Town Adams story.
I'd rather not. I'm happy now. Seriously, he called up from Buffalo. Roger called one time from Buffalo, the court reporter, and said, "Your judge did a pretty good job for you today." I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Well, he came through with a great big endorsement and all kinds of stuff." And I said, "I didn't know it." And it was really the truth. Unbeknown to me, he's up there and like just rooting for me and everything else. Who never told me. That's the kind of guy he was. And that's the respect I had for him too, and the love for him. The only part about it was he knew I was an Irish Catholic, and he was a 33rd or a strong Mason, whatever it is, and he would be Johnny on the spot. If there was something about not quite good for the Catholic Church, he would right there put the note right on my desk, and this was a war. So it happened before that in St. Patrick's Day. That Judge Ed O'Connor was a judge, but long-time DA, and he said, looked at me and says, "What the hell are you trying to do?" I said, "What do you mean?" "You got an orange tie on St. Patrick's Day." I'm colorblind. And I go right across the street to Shears over there and pick up a green tie. "Yes, Judge, no problem." That was a tough one, though.
How about your calendar in your office there when Lee Town Adams came in? You had something blacked out.
Oh, that was the Battle of the Boyne. That was part of the Orangeman's Day. That was it. And the black part was March 17th was blacked out. I'll let it go there.
You're leaving the rest of these two guys hanging. They want to complete the story.
It would get, we kept on that way for quite a while. And that goes back to what we thought of each other. And if you can do it with a guy like that, and that's the way we really thought of each other. He was a little tough at spots, I mean, if we go to a tavern or something like that, well, he's a little slow with the wallet, but they all knew it. They all knew it. When I was in college, my father taught me, he says, if you're the fifth guy, you buy the fifth drink. So that's the philosophy he had.
What was the drink of choice? Wasn't it Gerace?
Yes.
Yes.
That's,
Usually always beer. But,
Can I tell a perilous story?
no.
the answer is yes. Of course, go ahead. I'll got you covered.
Objection.
Years ago, I don't know what trial Paul was doing, but he was going to do a daily copy by himself. And pretty something. He was quite the typist. I couldn't type 30 words a minute. And anyway, he had gotten word that there was a girl going to Fredonia College that was quite adept at typing and the law and everything else. In fact, I think she was eventually going to be a lawyer. So he gets a hold of her, and she comes down, and they do the daily copy, and she types, she gets the transcript out, and I mean, he was so happy with it, and it really worked out well. Now we fast forward.
That's good enough right there.
Now we fast forward about 10 years, and she's on a custody case, and she's got a diary that I won't even mention the attorneys that were involved in the thing,
You
but
better not.
they want to get the diary. At least the husband wants to get the diary in evidence because she's got all kinds of things in that diary that didn't look too good for her. She liked to play tennis, and she liked sex, and she sometimes did both at the same time. She could be watching a tennis game at the college, and
I didn't do it.
so forth.
I didn't even know.
Talked about these people that she met in the Fredonia bars and so forth and so on. So, and even talked about some of the attorneys that she would like to. She didn't, but she would like to get involved with. I think one of them was her attorney. And so I said to Noma, who was the family court clerk, I said, I got a good idea. I said, let's tell Paul that he was in her diary. So I came over first and I said, hey Paul, you've been holding out on me. I said, how'd you get in Perla's diary? What are you talking about? What are you talking about? He said, this thing came into evidence and she's talking about all these different people, these males and so forth, and your name is it. Oh, it can't be. I said, it is. Oh, you're full of it. So I walk away. About a half hour later, Noma comes over and says about the same thing. Now he's believing it.
He was a friend.
So now he's running home to Judy. Tom says, I'm in this diary. I never had anything to do with her, So we forgot about it. No, but you didn't. couple weeks later, Noma's over there and Paul says, I can't believe that she put my name. Oh, didn't Tom tell you? We were only kidding.
He was a pal.
He was ready to kill me.